All applause for Billy Eggs. I'm Lance Morgan with Curated Texan, and I'm thrilled to be here. And we want to not only thank headliners, but also our hosts today, Peter Martino, Forrest Priest, Linda Ball, Nina Means. Thank you all, Rob Giardelli. Thank you all for having us here. Well, we all know why we're here today. It's because we're celebrating you. This is your live, Jeffrey Banks. You all may remember that old television show, but we're not going to go quite that deep, but we're going to have a lot of fun today. So thank you for being in town.
Thank you.
You took the train here from New York City.
I did. It's a long story, and we're not going to go into that.
But planes, trains, and automobiles, you got here, and we're so thrilled to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here.
And you're here for Storyteller, your new book, your new autobiography book. So tell us about the origin story of Storyteller and what made you write your own book, because you've written so many great bestsellers, right? Of Perry Ellis,
Norman Norell, Patricia Underwood, Tartan, Romancing the Plaid, which was my first book. My obsession as a child was over Scottish plaid. Don't ask me why. But I thought if I wrote about it, maybe I'd figure out why I was obsessed with it. I wrote all of those books with my co-author, a woman named Doria de la Chapelle, who I met when my career was just starting. She had a PR firm. She later came to work with me. She was a copywriter for Bendel's, but she'd never written a book, and I'd never written a book. And I went to Barnes & Noble, and I bought a book, How to Write a Book. It should have been for dummies. In the book, it basically, it said you do an outline and you do a table of contents. You write a letter to the editor, not that you send it to the editor, but where you sort of compile all your passion for this idea of a book, so you could get your ideas together. And then the last thing it said on the last page was do a one-page marketing plan for how you want to get your book out there in the world. Well, I said to myself, well, I'm a designer. I know marketing. I did a 15-page marketing plan. And every potential publisher that we showed said, we've never seen a first-time author do a 15-page marketing plan. And the very first thing on the first page of the plan was, I want to be on CBS Sunday Morning. It's my favorite show. I love it. I always learn something from it. And the last thing on the last page was, I want to be on Martha Stewart's show. Everything in between we accomplished. When I got the first copy of the book, I found out the name of a producer at CBS Sunday Morning. I sent her a little one-paragraph thing. I have this book on tartan plaid, and I think, it would be a great segment. And she wrote back immediately, and she said, yeah, I think that would be great. When are you launching your book? I said, in 2 weeks at Saks Fifth Avenue. She said, can we bring cameras? I said, bring them. And so we had like a 12-minute segment, which in TV time is enormous. It's a long time. And they ran it the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend, which is like the most perfect timing because everybody's home and stuff with turkey and waiting for the football games to come on.
And wearing tartan.
Yeah, and wearing tartan. Yeah. And then they reran it Labor Day weekend. So it was really good. Awesome. Anyway, that's a long-winded answer.
Well, no, that's a great answer. So where did this journey begin? You grew up in Washington, D.C.
I did.
And so who were some of your early style influences who helped you start along this path?
Well, I would say the first influence was my mother. She was an incredibly stylish woman. She loved clothes. She worked for the government, as did my father. And she was very strict about my sister and myself dressing properly for the right occasion. I remember when I was 5 years old, I went to the theater for the first time, and my mother said, when we go to the theater, we always wear a jacket and tie. And I had a little brown, long clip-on tie and a tweed jacket. And I went to see Mary Martin in The Sound of Music on its way to Broadway, trying out in Washington.
Wow.
And the curtain rose, and there's Mary Martin in this wooden tree at the back of the stage. And as she's singing, the hills come alive. The tree magically moved to the front of the stage. I was in heaven. I was like completely enraptured. And at intermission, my father said, come on, let's go to the men's room. And I said, no. And he said, come on, I'm sure you have to go. I said, no, I don't have to go. He said, come on, let's go. I said, I never want to leave this seat. I mean, I was just so enthralled and still to this day love the theater.
Love the theater.
Yeah. So just one other story about my mother. So just so you know what she's like. First of all, the book is dedicated to my mother. My mother will be 105 in 2 months.
The OG.
The OG.
Wow.
The OG still has her nails done. You know, she's.
That's why she's living to be 105.
I guess so. I guess so. But my mother used to wear gloves every day to work, and suede gloves, cashmere gloves, wool jersey gloves, all kinds of gloves. And whenever she bought a pair of gloves, she bought 2 pair of the identical glove because she felt the cardinal sin that a woman could commit was to have soiled gloves in the course of a day. So she would keep the extra pair inside the plastic sleeve in her handbag so that if her gloves got soiled in the course of the day, she could switch to the fresh pair of gloves. So that gives you an indication of what my mother was like.
That says a whole lot about you too, right? Your attention to detail,
Yeah.
which is very exciting. I think what's really interesting is you all will come through this and read it, have it on your coffee table, and hopefully buy it and give it to friends as well. You will see how real you are, Jeffrey, and how revealing you are in this book. Tell us about that journey, because you've been an observer of other fashion entities that you've written about, and we'll talk about your design as well. But tell us what it was like to sit down, and because I mean, there's nothing left out here from what I can see.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to sit there and write and talk about yourself. It was also very hard because this was the first book I did without my writing partner. Unfortunately, a year and a half ago, she was diagnosed with aphasia, which is what Bruce Willis has. It's a form of dementia where you can no longer form words or read. And it just breaks my heart because she was a woman who was all about words, and now she can't use them. So it was a double kind of a problem. I'm writing about myself, trying to be truthful about myself, and I'm also not being able to bounce it off with this writing partner. But I struggled with the idea of even doing a book like this. Many years people have editors and stuff have said you should write about yourself, but I thought, oh, that's so narcissistic, me, I. But the way I've sort of tried to write the book is about all the fascinating, wonderful, interesting people I've met in my journey in the fashion business and in life. And so I really tried to make it more about them, and I'm just the connective tissue between them.
And you write about everyone because you've known everyone. It's incredible.
Not everyone.
It's a laundry list of pop culture zeitgeist of, from the 70s to now. It's incredible. So tell us, let's talk about the 70s, shall we? One of my favorite decades. You started out in the 70s with your design career. Do you want to take us back to those days and into the 80s and share your insight of what was then, what is now, and where you see things moving forward?
Well, when I was 13, I made a list of the 10 people I most wanted to meet by the time I was 23.
That's in the book.
That's in the book.
Yeah.
And I met 7 of the 10. I didn't meet the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. I didn't meet Truman Capote. But I did meet Givenchy and Ralph Lauren and Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire and Richard Avedon. That was kind of like a life goal. Now, is that normal for a 13-year-old boy? I don't know, but it was what I wanted, and I was very happy to achieve it, and Barbara Streisand too. I left her out. I always had these goals in front of me of things I wanted to do, things I wanted to accomplish. I won a Coty Award when I was 23. I was the youngest person to ever win that. The Coty Award was the predecessor of the CFDA Award, which I also won.
Yeah.
It was the fashion world's Oscar. So it was what I wanted.
So that happened at a young age.
Yes, it did.
What was that like to achieve that amount of acclaim and fame and be a part of that?
It was heady. It was wonderful. If I had it to do all over again, I think I would have probably liked it to have happened later on. I think I would have appreciated it even more. But a lot happened very, very quickly. I mean, you know, I had a royalty check for $3 million before I was 30 years old. So that was, you know.
That's a good check to get.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And I remember my business partner, the bank was across the street, and my business partner said, I'm going as your bodyguard to go across the street to deposit this check. Yeah. He didn't trust me with it.
Well, tell us about the sights and sounds of the 70s and 80s in New York as you were rising to the top.
Well, there was a store in Washington, D.C., a men's store called Britches of Georgetown, which was absolutely unique and special. And Washington is a very conservative town. Brooks Brothers was considered racy in Washington. So Britches was really a cut above everything else. And it was started by two guys who had been in the advertising business. And as soon as I discovered this store when I was 13 or 14, that was the only place I wanted to shop, much to my parents' dismay, because it was the most expensive store. But I was not going to be dismayed. I was going to that store. I was going to shop there. And I used to go in, you know, every couple of weeks to see what they had new, even if I wasn't in the market to buy. And I was in the store. I was 15, and I was in the store one day just looking around after school, and the assistant manager said, I've seen you in here before. I think you might be our youngest customer. He said, how old are you, 18? And I said, no, I'm 15. He said, 15? I said, yes. He said, well, I'm going to tell you a secret. We're going to open a second store next year. I said, yes, I know. On Connecticut Avenue, the old Saks Pasternak building. And he goes, how the hell do you know that? And I said, well, it was in DNR. DNR is the menswear equivalent of Women's Wear Daily. He said, you read DNR? And I said, yeah, I've had a subscription since I was 12. So he said, would you like to work for us? And I said, I'd love to work for you. And I started work that Saturday, never having had a job in my life. And I have to tell you, it was the most fun I ever had. It was just such a thrill to help a guy who didn't know how to put a shirt and tie together, you know, look great, and then have his wife or girlfriend come in the next weekend and say, do that again, do that again. So it was really a lot of fun to do.
So along the way, and one other thing is that you're not a name dropper. You've had real relationships with every single person in your book that you write about very lovingly. You worked for Ralph Lauren first. I'm guessing the Britches of Georgetown was a great platform.
Yes,
Tell us about
how
that.
I met him.
Yeah, in the 70s.
So when I was 16, a year after I'd started working at Britches, I was very proud of the fact I had perfect attendance. Elementary school, junior high school, and now high school. And even when I didn't feel well, I did not want to ruin that record. I would go to school. But then I found out that Ralph Lauren was coming down to do a charity fashion show for Valentine's Day. Now, you have to remember, at that time, there were maybe 12 people who worked for him. It was a very small company. He hadn't done any advertising. But I believed in this guy. I knew this guy was going to be as big as he is today. Yeah. And I wanted to hitch my star with his. So I told my parents, I'm not going to school on Friday. Write a note, lie, do whatever you have to do. I'm going to meet Ralph Lauren. So they wrote a note and said I was at the orthodontist all day. And I got dressed up in head-to-toe polo, and I went to the store early. And the two owners of the store said to me, do you have your driver's license? And I said, yeah, I just got it like a month ago. Why? They said, here. And they gave me the keys to the company station wagon. They said, pick Ralph up at the airport. So I get in the company station wagon, and I get halfway to National Airport. That's what it was called then. And I got a flat tire. And I didn't know the first thing about changing a flat tire. Thankfully, there was a spare in the back, and I flagged someone down, and this guy helped me. But now I get to the airport, and I'm late. But fortunately, his plane was late, and it touched down, Eastern Airlines shuttle touched down just as I was getting to the airport. And I picked up Ralph, and I picked up Joe Barato, who was his vice president of sales, and they were in a piss-poor mood. And I said, what's wrong? And they said that they had brought these framed, beautiful silk scarves that looked like Hermes scarves that were done by Ratti in Italy, of polo players. And they had wanted to bring them on the plane, and Eastern Airlines wouldn't let them. They said, you have to check them in baggage. And the aluminum frames broke, and the glass shredded the silk. So they were not happy. So I told every joke I knew on the drive from the airport back to the store.
With your 16-year-old sense of humor.
Yeah. And then we got back to the store, and by the time we got back to the store, they were laughing. And I started talking to Ralph, and he said, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be a designer like you. I want to come to New York and go to fashion school. And he said to me, he said, when you come to New York next year to look at colleges, give me a call. I might have a job for you. Well, that was all I needed to hear. That one sentence kept me going for an entire year. And a year later, I came up with my mother to look at schools. We came up on March 16th, 1971, to look at schools. It was a cold spring day. And then the next day was my interview, which happened to be St. Patrick's Day, which we completely forgot that it was St. Patrick's Day. And Ralph's office was just off of Fifth Avenue. When we were coming from the east side to the west side, we had to get through the parade. We get in front of 40 West 55th Street. I said to my mother, now you go to Baum and Teller, go to the safari room, I'll meet you in an hour. And my mother says, no, I have to meet this Ralph Lauren. I can't have you working for someone I haven't met. And I'm like, Mom, I'm going on a job interview. You're not going to meet Ralph Lauren. And the two of us are arguing, yelling at each other. I'm sure you could have heard us over the parade. And finally, I turned my back on my mother, and I just walked in. I left her standing on the street. And I walked in, and the receptionist said, Mr. Lauren will be down in a minute. Please have a seat. And she gestured to this denim-covered love seat. And I go to sit down, and there was a black man sitting there. And I looked at him, and I said, excuse me, aren't you Bobby Short? And he goes, why, yes, I am. And the two of us started this conversation. He was coming up to get a tuxedo for his performance at the Carlisle. And a few minutes later, Ralph comes down and he says, Jeffrey, have you met Bobby? And Bobby goes, oh, we're old friends, you know. And it was great. And actually, there's a couple of Bobby stories, because a couple of years later, I switched schools, and I thought I was Mr. Big Shot at 19, and I wanted, I switched schools, which my parents were okay with, to Parsons, but I wanted an apartment. I didn't want to live in a dorm. I thought I was above that. And my father said, okay, we'll pay for an apartment as long as it's $400 a month or less. The apartment I wanted was $414, and my father was not going to budge for that extra $14. So I had them come to New York for a weekend to schmooze them and try to, I took them to the theater, and I took them shopping, and I took them to the Metropolitan Museum, and then I took them to see Bobby Short at the Carlisle on Saturday night. In those days, he did 2 shows. He was just finishing the first show when we got there. We're standing in the vestibule waiting to be seated, and he looks up from the piano and he waves at me. So, of course, I wave back. And my mother goes, who are you waving at? And I said, Bobby Short. You don't know Bobby Short. And I said, yes, I do. And she sort of rolled her eyes, and, and he finishes his set, and he gets up and leaves, and the waiter takes us over to our table, which was right next to the piano, which should have been an indication that their son had a little pull here. But we sit down, and my father, who never drank a drop of liquor in his life, he had his tourist camera with the big lens hanging around his neck at 10 o'clock at night, and he orders his root beer, and my mother orders her Scotch neat, and a couple minutes later, a waiter comes over with a Jeroboam of champagne. And my mother goes, did you order that? And I said, no. She said, well, send it back. I said, no, Bobby must have sent it over. You don't know Bobby Short. And just as she said that, she got a tap on the shoulder, and there was Bobby Short standing with his hands on his hips, and he goes, why, you must be Mrs. Banks. End of story. End of story. We go outside after the performance. My father turns to me and says, how much is that apartment? I said, $414. He said, okay. So Bobby Short got me my first.
Love that. Yay. And for some of our younger invitees, attendees today, Bobby Short was, he had the Charlie commercial. He was
Mr. New York. He was Mr. Cafe Society. He was the reason people wanted to live in New York because he knew Cole Porter and he knew George Gershwin and he knew Irving Berlin and he sang their songs and interpreted them so beautifully. Yeah. And he dated Gloria Vanderbilt for a while.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was Ralph Lauren, and you worked with Ralph Lauren. And then there were the Calvin Klein years.
Yeah.
Calvin Klein, everyone's heard of Calvin Klein in this room, I'm sure. But you have a special attachment to Calvin Klein.
Yes.
And his initials, which sort of changed the face of the world. Can I be that bold?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Okay.
So when I switched schools from Pratt to Parsons, when I was at Pratt, I bullied them into a schedule where I only went to school 2 days a week, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. But that left Monday, Wednesday, Friday free to work, which was much more fun and much more exciting. But when I switched to Parsons, they said nothing doing. You have to come to school every day from 9 o'clock till 2:30. After that, your life is your own. So I would get to work at 3 o'clock, and I'd be at work until 10, 11 on most nights. And if we were working on a show, I might be there till 3 or 4 in the morning, go home, sleep for an hour, do schoolwork for an hour, and start it all over again. And I was a zombie. I was falling asleep at school. I was falling asleep at work. And Ralph said, quit. He said, the whole reason you go to school is to have the job you already have. And school said, quit working for Ralph and finish. You have like less than a year to finish. And my parents said, it's up to you. You do whatever you want. We trust you now. We know you're a big boy and you can do whatever you want. But I knew I would break their heart if I didn't finish school and get my degree. So I made the tough decision to stop working and just go to school. And 2 months after that, I'm in class, and Mrs. Kagi, who was the head of the fashion design department and who did not like me because I did not need her to get a job. She comes into class and she says, Calvin Klein is on the phone for you in my office. And I said, oh. I went into her office and picked up the phone. I knew him socially. I'd never worked for him, obviously. And he said, I hear you're not working for Ralph. I want you to come work for me. And I'm like, Calvin, the reason I'm not working for Ralph is I got to pay attention to school. He said, come have lunch with me tomorrow. I said, Calvin, I get a lunch hour. He said, meet me at Bill's. Bill's was the garment center restaurant that was like Sardi's. And all the designers had their pictures framed above the booth. So I sat under Calvin's picture with Calvin having lunch as he's trying to convince me to come work for him. And I keep saying no, no, no. And he says, come across the street and come to my showroom. He was very proud of the fact he had just launched his first full sportswear collection. Up to that point, he had just done coats and suits. So I go across the street and I look at this stuff, and he's proudly showing me his green suede pea coat and his pants and so forth. And then he holds up this tweed A-line skirt. And he said, and this is my Harris tweed skirt. And I went, that's not Harris tweed. And he goes, yes, it is. I said, no, it's not. I said, Calvin, that's not even 100% wool. I said, what is that, wool and acrylic? And he goes, yeah. I said, and where'd you buy that fabric, Anglo? And he goes, yeah. I said, Calvin, Harris tweed is 100% wool. It's 28, 29 inches wide, hand woven, the Outer Hebrides Islands of Scotland. That's Harris tweed. That is not Harris tweed. All of a sudden, the price doubled what he was going to pay me. And he basically said, you come to work when you have the time. If you have schoolwork or you have a project and you can't come in, I'll pay you anyway. And I thought that was the proverbial offer I couldn't refuse, because it was a way of staying in the industry and finishing school. So that's what I did. So I think the thing you're alluding to is on my first day working for him, I decided to bring a little present because I thought it was kind of great that he hired me. And I had a friend, Tommy Gingerella, who silk screen T-shirts in Soho, which was like the Wild West in those days. And I knew that Calvin's favorite color was chocolate brown, so I took a couple of chocolate brown T-shirts and a couple of white T-shirts, and I took the press kit logo with his name, and I had them print on the bicep Calvin Klein in white on brown and brown on white. And I put it in a brown box with white ribbon, and I brought it to him on the first day of work. And he opened it up and he said, well, this is a great gift, Jeffrey, but I don't think I could wear my name. I would feel funny wearing my name. And I said, okay. And he left it on the credenza open behind his desk. And the next day, his business partner, Barry Schwartz, came in. He saw the T-shirts. He says, is this in the line? And Calvin goes, no. He says, just a gift that Jeffrey gave me. I would never wear my name. And Barry went, I think it's a really good idea. And Calvin said, no. And so then I did something 6 weeks later, which probably could have gotten me fired. But I took one color of every T-shirt the night before the fashion show, and I went down at 10 o'clock at night to Tommy, and he silk screened Calvin Klein in white on every T-shirt and put them in his oven to dry. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, I took them and I went back to the office and I made the sales girls who were seating everybody for the fashion show wear the T-shirt with the logo on it. Now, the T-shirts in the fashion show had nothing on it. The next day, when they started to sell to the stores, all the buyers said, no, we don't want the plain T-shirt. We want the one with the name on it. And that's how it started. That's before the jeans, that's before the underwear.
So I'm betting you had him put his name on underwear as well?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a natural progression. I would claim that victory if it wasn't.
Actually, it was jeans first and then underwear.
Jeans first, then underwear. Oh, that's right. Calvin Klein. Brooke Shields.
And a funny story, when we made the jeans, the first jeans were done in the sample room. And you really have to make jeans in a jean factory because jeans, they get a lot of stress points, and you need a special machine to stitch them. But we did them with a regular sewing machine. And as the girl was walking in the fashion show, she had a white tank top and these blue jeans and blonde hair, blue eyes. And she's walking down the runway and the label falls off the back because it wasn't made in a jeans factory. But eventually he figured that out. And obviously, that made him a millionaire. Those jeans, he got $1 a pair for every jean that was sold.
And they weren't cheap then.
No,
right?
No.
So, wow. Well, what I think is fascinating is that you've seen fashion go from very authentic, very designer-driven, to now, right? Where you have influencers, you have DIYers, you have TikTokers, you have people creating their own style and sustainability. Right. Can you tell us about what your personal thoughts are on that arc, if you will?
Well, I think fashion has become much more democratic. I mean, in the old days, you got Vogue or you got GQ, and if GQ said you wear a jacket without a shirt underneath, you did it because that was the rule. Or Vogue said, it's all about long skirts, you threw all your short skirts away. Nobody dresses like that anymore. I don't care how much money you have, no one takes a wardrobe and throws it away and starts anew every season. It's just not practical, number one. And number two, there are many more things that we want to spend our money on, whether it's a trip, whether it's a great meal, many more things that interest us besides just buying clothes. And let's face it, if you live in the middle class in America, you don't need any clothes. Unless you got really fat or really thin, if you have to wear a suit to work, you have a suit. You have 5 of them, or 6 of them, or 7 of them. And if you go to cocktail parties, you've got 10 black cocktail dresses. Our job as a designer is to try to make something so enticing, so enthralling, that you think, I can't live without it, and I can't go another day without getting it. And sometimes we do our job well, and sometimes we don't. But there's a lot of reasons that fashion is more democratic, and I think it's a good thing. The only thing I think is bad about fashion today sort of goes back to what my mother said. When we go to the theater, we always wear a jacket and tie. I do not like the idea of going to the theater, sitting in a seat that I've spent $300-400 for, next to somebody in sweatpants and flip-flops. It's wrong. It's really wrong.
Or fly on an airplane.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an affront to the performers. They've had to take years to learn their craft, to learn what they're doing, whether they're an opera singer or a ballet dancer or an actor. And I think you have to, and I'm not saying I wear a jacket every time I go to the theater, but I wear dress pants and I wear dress shoes. I don't go in jeans, I don't go in shorts, I don't go in flip-flops. And there are plenty of places to wear those other things. But the beach, exactly. But not, and in New York, to see people walking down the street in the middle of the summer in flip-flops with the soles of their dirty feet, it's terrible. It's terrible. Wear it at the beach, wear it at home, but not on the streets of New York.
Amen. Speaking of the streets of New York, you can always tell a Texas woman walking down the street in New York because of all the colors she wears, right? Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay, good. All right, so
And she has makeup on.
and she's beautifully groomed. Thank you, Eve. You know about that. All right, we're going to open up the floor for a few questions for the great Jeffrey Banks, and no holds barred is what you said. They can, personal, professional, anything, right? Okay. So who would like to ask the first question? John Conroy, who is modeled for Jeffrey Banks, would you like to ask him a question? Sorry to embarrass you, but...
And if you ask who's your favorite model, don't go there.
Damn.
30 years ago, I might have been. I want to know how you had the stamina, after all these years, to continue to have this vibrant personality and energy and be authentic in a room full of people from city to city, like it's a fresh start every time you're in front of everybody.
It's because I like what I do. I mean, I really do enjoy designing. I really do enjoy creating product that people will wear or use. I mean, I'm on Home Shopping Network. If you had ever told me I would go on HSN and be selling, the stuff I design, I would have said you're crazy. But A, it's fun, and B, I really feel like I'm giving great value. My sheets at $29.95 are really beautiful sheets. They perform well. They don't crock. They don't pill. And people love them. And I love when people come up to me and say, I have sheets of yours that are 10 years old and I still use them and I still love them. I mean, that's a thrill for a designer. Or when a man says to me, I have a sweater of yours that's 20 years old and I can't fit in it, but I won't give it away. That's as a designer, that's really thrilling.
It's important.
Yeah.
I think Kristen O'Brien with People Magazine, you had a question.
This is a Kristen O'Brien question, but not necessarily people, but I want to know who is a public figure that you think has great style today?
Who's the public figure? Well, I would say probably Michelle Obama, who has a brand new book, which you should see. It's called The Look, and it's all about her relationship to fashion, why she chose the dresses that she chose when she was in the White House. It's very, very calculated, very thought out, and it's really quite interesting.
So the psychology behind her dressing.
Yeah, I mean, if she went to India, she wore clothing designed by Bipu Mohapatra, who's a friend of mine who is from India, now an American citizen, and she specifically wore his clothes getting off the plane in India because she wanted to honor him, she wore a Tracy Reese dress when she went out to speak at the convention. Now that dress, the fabric for that dress was hand woven. That dress cost like $4,000, but Tracy Reese got such demand for it, she figured out a way to make the fabric less expensive so she could make a $400 version of it, and the stores waited for a year and a half because they said customers wanted the Michelle Obama dress.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. Wow. More questions? I know we have a lot of more questions.
Yes.
Go ahead, Nina Means with the Austin Fashion Incubator.
Yes, I work with a lot of aspiring brands and designers, students, who I know are going to be so inspired by your story. What would you tell an upcoming designer about how to build their career?
The first thing I would say is take business courses. I never did that. And if I could do it all over again, I would definitely do that. I mean, fashion is a business. You know, many times we like to think of ourselves or think of fashion as being an art form. And it gets very close to being an art form often. I mean, when you look at a Yves Saint Laurent, Lesage embroidered Van Gogh jacket that took, 6,000 hours to embroider, that is close to being art. But he sold more than one of them. And if you don't sell more than one of them, you're going to be out of business very soon. So learning how to write a business plan, learning how to do a business is what keeps you in business. There's so many great young talents who didn't know how to run a business and go out of business because they didn't think about it. Every young designer, I'll tell you this, I hate Project Runway. I hate Project Runway because it gives false hope to kids. They think all I have to do is go on that show, win that show, and my life is set. And that is so far from the truth. I can't tell you. I mean, look at all the years that Project Runway has been around. And with the exception of Christian Siriano, is there one person you can name who's still in business and doing well? He's like the only one. Okay, so. I think it's much better. I tell young people, take a couple of business courses or more and go work for someone. I mean, the greatest gift I ever got was to be able to work for Ralph Lauren and work for Calvin Klein and learn what I learned from them. That really helped me in my business.
Mm-hmm. Great. Wait, okay. One more?
Am I allowed?
Hey, sure.
I'm just curious about the whole celebrity culture around fashion now. When I worked in New York at Elle back in the late 90s, early aughts, it was just sort of that tipping point with fashion shows of turning from all fashion people to celebrities. And also with the covers then at the time, that was when I think I first started seeing celebrities on the cover and not models.
Yeah,
so I'm just wondering, how do you feel about where it's come, how far we've come with that, and good, bad, or both?
I have to tell you, I'm not a fan of celebrities in general. I mean, I've worked with some. Diana Ross, she ordered a fur coat for my men's fur collection. We made it special for her. We got it to her. It took a year to get paid. And this is Diana Ross. Bill Cosby. My office used to be in 30 Rock, which was fantastic, overlooking the ice skating rink on the 31st floor. We spent $2 million a year just on rent, but it was fantastic. I mean, you could walk across the street to Saks, you could walk a couple of blocks to Tiffany's. It was great. It was a fabulous, fabulous place to be in the 80s, and NBC is in the same building. And in those days, I was taking buyers out to dinner and going to the theater and stuff, so I didn't do a lot of TV watching. And I remember my friend said, "Did you see Cosby last night? He had on one of your sweaters." And I said, "No, I don't really watch TV." And then the next week, Cosby had another one of your sweaters on. So finally, like the third week, I thought, well, this is kind of crazy. And I called up the Bill Cosby show, which was in the building, their offices, and I got the costume designer. And I said, "Look, I hear Mr. Cosby's wearing a lot of my sweaters. Would you like to come up and get wholesale?" "Oh my God, we'll be there in 15 minutes." So they came up, the costume designer came up, and I said, "Listen," "I'm perfectly willing to give you guys clothes for him. But let me coordinate and put together outfits for you so you have the right pants and shirt and sweater and so forth. And I'd love a credit at the end of the show. That would be nice, but okay, if you can't give me a credit, that's okay. At least I can tell my friends that." So we put together like 12 outfits for Mr. Cosby. And the next week, I stay home purposely to watch the show. And she'd taken apart every single outfit. Like Malcolm Jamal Warner had on the pants, and somebody else had on the sweater. And I thought, why did I even go through this exercise? Then I get a call from her. Bruce Weber did all my advertising, and we shoots and is a great friend. And we had done this little sort of catalog, not to sell from, but just really as advertising. And there was a purple bucket hat that I put on the model with a purple sweater. And she calls back and she says, Mr. Cosby really likes that hat. I said, well, the hat is a prop. It's not for sale. We didn't make it. But Mr. Cosby really likes it. I said, well, tell Mr. Cosby I'm really glad he likes it, but it's not for sale. And she kept, she was like, but what am I going to tell him? I said, you tell him it's not for sale. He got a sweater for nothing, tell him it's not for sale. And I mean, celebrities are, they're a hassle. My salesman, who was a great guy, unfortunately passed away. And his name was Mark Starr, and he was a real, football fan, car fan, so forth. So I used to tease him and call him Brenda Starr, just to get a rise out of him. And they don't know who Brenda Starr is. No, Brenda Starr was a comic strip. Yeah. Anyway, I came back from lunch one day, and Mark said, Bob Costas called and wants to come up for close. And I said, who's Bob Costas? And he said, he's just the guy on the Olympics for NBC and blah, blah, blah. And please, can he come up? I said, okay, fine. Have him come up. Bob Costas is this high. He literally is like this. Nicest man in the world. He was a big Jeffrey Banks fan. He wore my clothes, bought retail. So he was starting a new show, which was going to be called Later with Bob Costas, which came on after The Tonight Show. And he said, I only want to wear your clothes exclusively. Now, this was after the Bill Cosby debacle. And I said, okay, here's the deal. We will give you clothes. We will tailor clothes, because all the clothes had to be made for him. The sweaters had to be hand knit because his arms are short. It all had to be tailored for him. And I said, we'll do all of that for every show, but I must have a credit at the end of the show. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to give me $1, but the credit has to read Bob Costas clothes designed by Jeffrey Banks. Not wardrobe provided by, not furnished by, designed by Jeffrey Banks. And they said, oh yeah, absolutely, no problem. I said, when does the show start? They said in September. This was like in May or June. I said, great, we have enough time to do all of this. 2 weeks later, they called me. They said, we're starting to film in 2 weeks. We need clothes. And of course, then I had to go into overdrive, to get these clothes made and get the sweaters knitted and all this stuff. We get all this stuff together. The show comes on in September. The credits roll at the end. And it says, Bob Costas clothes furnished by Jeffrey Banks. And I was livid. And they said, well, the SEC said, because you gave us an accommodation, that's what we have to say. And I said, that's it. That's the last time I do that. It's a hassle. It's a hassle.
Great. Let me just. Well, as a little boy who grew up reading GQ and seeing your ads in it, it has been a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. I think we're sold out of books.
No, we still have books. We still have books.
So
And there's lots of
more
stories in the book that, like Barbara Streisand and Fred Astaire, and Audrey Hepburn, who was my love.
So buy a couple, buy it for your friends, parents, neighbors, friends, and make it a merrier Christmas. Thanks to Jeffrey Banks.
Thank you, Austin, for giving me such a great reception.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Jeffrey Banks.